So this is the second part of the lecture for Chapter 8, and we're in the middle of Section 8.2. So we're talking about the process of photosynthesis. It begins with light energy entering the first part of photosynthesis, which we call the light-dependent reactions. And these occur in the thylakoid portion of a chloroplast. So if you remember again, a chloroplast is an organelle within a plant cell. And within that organelle, we have two sections. We have a thylakoid section, and we have the fluid surrounding the thylakoid, which we call the stroma. And so within the thylakoid is where we have the first part of photosynthesis occurring. This is where the light energy from the sun is absorbed and the light-dependent reactions are occurring. And in order for them to occur, we need water to be present. What happens is that water gets split, and the energy from that splitting goes into the first part of our building of glucose. So we're starting to harvest some energy here. What comes out of the light-dependent reactions is oxygen, because then that oxygen comes from the water that is going in. The other thing we get from the light-dependent reactions is the making of ATPs. And also, electrons are put onto these electron carrier molecules that we call NADPHs. You think of the NADPH as kind of like a taxi, and it's carrying electrons from the light-dependent reaction to the next part of photosynthesis, which is the Calvin cycle. And the reason we need a carrier is because they're occurring in slightly different places. They're still inside the chloroplast, but they're moving from the thylakoids to the stroma. And so to get there, they take NADPH. And so NADPH drives the electrons that we get from the light-dependent reactions over to the Calvin cycle. And then primarily those electrons are representing energy. And then the Calvin cycle is occurring, remember, in that jelly liquid that's surrounding the thylakoid inside the chloroplast. The Calvin cycle is occurring, but it needs carbon dioxide to work, and it needs some more water. So the Calvin cycle is actually where we're going to get sugar made. So after the Calvin cycle, sugar is made, and it's made with the help of the energy from ATP and from the energy that we get from the NADPH, and it also is using the carbon from carbon dioxide, and it uses some water to make the reactions work. And that carbon from carbon dioxide actually goes to build up that C6. The C comes from these carbons from carbon dioxide. C6, H12, here's our H12, and our O6s come from here. So you can see how the plant is able to build a sugar simply from the carbon dioxide and water and the energy that it has converted into this chemical energy converted from the sun's energy. You can see, I'll start this little active art so you can see the process visually played out here. Let's see if I can figure out where that went. Okay, so this is what they call active art, and it's just a little way to show how photosynthesis works and the ingredients. So first of all, we have the addition of sunlight. So you can see that being added here. And then we need the addition of water. So water is going to actually enter the plant through the roots there. And then we need carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide, again, is going to be used. First of all, the sunlight and the water are used in the light-dependent reactions. And we also have water and carbon dioxide used in the Calvin cycle. The carbon dioxide actually enters the plant through its leaves. There are little pores on the bottom of the leaves called stomata, and that's where the carbon dioxide actually flows in and where the oxygen is going to flow out. So you can see here now what's happening is photosynthesis is occurring, so the water is entering the plant and the carbon dioxide is entering the plant, and what's coming out are oxygens. These little O2s here are oxygen being produced. They actually also come out of the leaves. And sugar is being made and stored actually in the leaves and flowers of this plant. Okay, so we talked about the fact that we have light-dependent reactions. So what is the role of light and chlorophyll in photosynthesis? Well, actually they're linked because chlorophyll is a pigment. In addition to the water and the carbon dioxide, photosynthesis is going to need light and chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is called a pigment, and there are actually two types of chlorophyll that we find in plant leaves. Plant leaves is where photosynthesis is going to be occurring because that's where the chloroplast is located in those plant cells. And within the chloroplast, we have what's called chlorophyll. The pigments are things that give color to something. So chlorophyll is what makes a leaf look green or a plant look green because it is a green pigment. The two main types of chlorophyll are chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. And each of these chlorophylls actually absorb sunlight in a specific way. They absorb light well in just either the blue-violet or the red region of visible light. So if you think of a rainbow, those are the colors that we find in visible light coming from the sun. And it's this range, actually in wavelength, from the smallest wavelength to the greatest wavelength. So the smaller the wavelength of light, the faster it's actually moving and vibrating, the more energy it actually has. And the slower, the red region is actually a little bit lower energy because these waves are coming at a greater distance apart, so they don't carry quite as much energy. So you can see here that chlorophyll A is the most common one we think of, is represented by this blue line, and it is absorbing very well in the purple violets here and in the red range. And chlorophyll B is actually going to extend even further into the blue range here. So it has the purple or violet and blue. And it also is going slightly into orange, but not really. It's really mostly just reds. So these are the wavelengths of light that chlorophyll actually can accept and actually sees. Seeing is not really a very scientific word to use here, but basically these are the wavelengths, the only wavelengths that chlorophyll can accept. When you look at this chart, what you might notice here is this is showing where we have no acceptance of chlorophyll's light. And what happens to be in the middle of that is green light. So what that's telling you here, this is absorption rates, is that chlorophyll does not absorb green light. So that green light gets reflected back out of a leaf, and that's why a leaf looks green to us. And that's what this is actually just saying, the exact same thing. So again, you need to know that chlorophyll and chloroplasts in plants like light in the blue, violet, and the red range. So light is a form of energy, so that any compound that absorbs light is going to absorb that energy that's coming from the light. And you can see those wavelengths actually explain where that energy is coming from. So if you think of light as a form of energy, that energy enters the chloroplast and then it enters the thylakoid. And this is actually a picture showing the membrane of a thylakoid. So a thylakoid has a bilayer, lipid bilayer membrane, just like our cells do. And within it, we have this photosystem. And a photosystem is where we find a chlorophyll molecule. So the pigments that give plants their color are found within the thylakoid, and they're found within these molecules called photosystems. And so light actually goes and it gets absorbed by these chlorophyll molecules. And these chlorophyll molecules then have lots of energy. And so what they do is they take electrons and they give them lots of energy. And the place that they get these electrons is from water. So the water that we add to a plant is actually going and it's being cut in half so that we have two hydrogens and oxygen. And we have this splitting process of breaking apart a water molecule is what happens is the electrons from the hydrogen actually get taken by the photosystem, and that photosystem is using them to now create energy from the light. When the chlorophyll absorbs the light, another way of saying that is the energy is transferred to the electrons in the molecule, raising the energy level of these electrons. And then the high energy electrons are what are going to make photosynthesis work. Okay, here's a quick quiz again. Stop to make sure you can answer these questions. The first one, in Van Helmont's experiment, most of the added mass of the tree came from water and carbon dioxide. So that's what makes up the mass of a tree. It's what makes a tree grow is the addition of water and carbon dioxide. It's not the soil. Plants use the sugars made in photosynthesis to make what? Starches. So if you think again of carbohydrates are actually part of what category of carbohydrate there is not just glucose, but there's also starches are a type of carbohydrate. And so plants use the glucose that they make to actually build starches, and that's what they store their energy as, and it also gives them their structure. The raw materials required for plants to carry out photosynthesis are, you should know that's carbon dioxide and water. The principal pigment in plants is, there are a lot of C words here. Which one is it? It's chlorophyll. The colors of light that are absorbed by chlorophylls are, you should know it's blue, violet, and red. And that's it. So the next lecture will be for section 3, and then we'll be finished with this chapter of the book.